Dear viewers, we have Robert Witmer with us today talking about his book, Serendipity. And Robert Witmer has resided in Japan for the past 45 years. Now an emeritus professor, he has had the opportunity to teach courses in poetry and creative writing, not only at his home university in Tokyo, but also in India. So he has a strong India connection. His poems and prose poetry have appeared in many print and online journals and books. His first book of poetry, a collection of haiku titled Finding a Way, was published in 2016. And his second book, Serendipity, was published earlier this year. And that's the book we are going to be focusing on today. We're going to be talking about today.
Okay.
So let's have the conversational ball.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Yeah. So we'll start with the first question, Robert. I went through your book, and the first thing that caught my attention and really intrigued me was the title, Serendipity. It means coming across something pleasant but unexpectedly, right? Isn't that what it means?
It does. Actually, and although this has nothing to do with why I chose that word as the title of my book, it is, I think, interesting. The word first appeared as a name for Sri Lanka.
Oh, is it?
1,300 years ago. It's a Persian word, which I believe was an effort for Persian speakers to say the name they heard the local people call their island. And it came out of their mouths, Serendib. And that was the first use of the word. I used it as the title for my book, because I liked the word. And you know, my idea of poetry is that it is very much a matter of the words that one uses to make the poem. William Carlos Williams, a famous modernist poet, once defined poetry as a little machine made out of words. And I think that really sums up much of what poetry is. It's the words that make the meaning. It's the words, of course, that carry the sound. So the words are very important. And when I write poems, I give a lot of attention to each individual word. And when I was looking for a title for my book, I was looking for a word I liked, and serendipity was one of those words. So yeah, that was a big part of the reason. Now, the discoveries, that's going to depend on each individual reader, I believe. There are things that I see each time I read the book, and sometimes I see things I hadn't seen when I put the book together. But my hope is that everyone who reads the book will make some discoveries on their own, and that those will be happy discoveries. Although to say that the discoveries are happy doesn't necessarily mean that the things discovered will be happy things. I've tried in writing the book to present not only things that are good that I have seen, but also to get people to think about some of the things that we human beings have not done well, and things that perhaps we should.
The good, the bad, the ugly, as they say.
The good, the bad, and the ugly, and the beautiful too.
Yeah, that's right. So that sounds good and seems to be like a very apt and appropriate title for your book.
Well, I hope that it's catchy and that people like it.
It really is. It catches the attention of the reader right away, and then you want to, flip the pages and go through the book.
I hope so.
And of course, and a lot of unexpected wonders popping up everywhere. So for me, it was a very enjoyable and interesting read, the book.
And I should maybe take just one moment to give a plug to my son, whose photograph it is on the cover of the book. And I don't know, I sent you, anyway, this is
this is the one
cover of
yes.
the book. And I don't know, there's something serendipitous about that photograph. My son, who actually is a photographer, that's his work. But this photograph was taken very serendipitously. He was walking down a street one day and saw some lights hanging from a pole and just aimed his camera at those lights and then went back and photoshopped the picture he'd taken.
That's great, yeah. So the next question that comes up is that the book is, of course, a collection of haiku, senryu, and haibun. These are all Japanese genres. So I'm curious to know, as I'm sure all our viewers would be, what attracted you to these forms of poetry, the Japanese genres?
Well, I have lived in Japan for 45 years. And so that's a long time. And in that time, I've come to, like Japanese art, Japanese painting, the sumie painting, but also other kinds of Japanese painting. And of course, the Japanese literary arts. And haiku is a very important poetic art in Japan, dating from one can look at different ways of discussing the origins of haiku, but it goes back hundreds of years. Actually, I discovered haiku for the very first time before I ever came to Japan. When I was a college student, I was looking through a bookstore near my campus, and I came across this little volume of haiku poems, translations of the Japanese masters, Basho, Issa, Buson, Shiki, and some others. And I found the poems quite beautiful and very, very different from anything else I had read up to that point. And later, when I, became a teacher of literature myself, in learning something about the modernist movement and the early modernist poets in European languages, I discovered there that the haiku was very important to them. Haiku was introduced into the West at the beginning of the 20th century. At that time, some intrepid travelers came to Japan from France, from Germany, from England, and also from Mexico, discovered the haiku, liked what they saw, and tried to translate some of the Japanese poems into their own languages. And some of these people even thought about perhaps trying to write poems like that in their own languages, and a few did try. And it was this that began the process of bringing haiku to places outside Japan. And one of the things that attracted these early modernists, and it's what attracts me as well, is the way that in haiku, the meaning is made from images. Rather than trying to explain what it is you mean, you attempt to use images as vivid as possible. Of course, images that not only appeal to the sense of sight, but also sound and the other sense perception, and make your meaning through those images. While at the same time using language as concisely as possible. In other words, trying to do it in as few words as possible.
Yes. Because even when I read haiku, I find it visually very captivating, almost cinematic in the way it, it touches your senses. So probably that was the objective of writing a haiku. And the other thing is it's very short and very sweet, but it conveys what it has to in those, few words or syllables as they would like to say.
Yeah, I mean, the haiku aims at a suggestiveness
Yes.
So rather than to tell the reader what it is you
Yes.
mean, you
It
suggest
alludes
that.
to it rather than.
And
Yeah.
a key principle in the composition of haiku is the use of juxtaposition,
Yes.
which is the, putting together of usually two, but sometimes it's more than two images in such a way that the poet Ezra Pound talked about this in terms of sculpture, like,
Okay.
two planes that
Yes.
are brought together, and somehow the putting together of those two, in this case, images,
Yes.
generates meaning, or makes it possible for the
Yes.
reader to find meaning there.
Which would be different from the images if taken, separately.
Mm-hmm.
Together, they come up with a different meaning altogether. Isn't that what it means, right?
Yeah. The meaning is created out of the putting together of those.
Juxtaposition of those two different images. Yeah. Right. Yeah, interesting. So when, Robert, I was going through your book, I realized that you'd penned a lot of haibun also.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd melded your, travels, your details of your travels along with, your poetic musings and haiku. And I especially liked some of your haibun, the woman in Leh, Banaras. I could obviously directly connect with that. And I loved that one on the book. That was very, very touching. I really enjoyed that. So tell us, just for the benefit of our viewers, what was the thought behind melding your travels with your poetry?
Well, first, of course, the travels themselves were very, very influential. I mean, I dare say that the years I spent traveling made me what I am today. I certainly wasn't the same person after 4 years of traveling, which I've spent more time traveling than that. So the travel experiences were seminal, is a word I would use. I mean, those experiences functioned like seeds that grew in me and showed me things that I think I probably would never have seen were it not for the travels. It also helped me, of course, when you travel, you meet people who are different from the people you grew up with, and that can help you to see things from different perspectives, and that, I think, is a very good thing. So the experiences themselves were very, very important to me. I'm getting older, so that figures into all of this. Although I wouldn't call my book a memoir, it is memoirish in the way that I am remembering and reflecting upon past experience. And in doing that, I eventually came to see that the book was, in a way, about memory itself. I mean, what memory is, the importance of memory to a person's life, what memories do to the experiences one has had. And so if I were to sum up, what my book is about, I think I'd call it an exploration of and a meditation upon language and memory.
That sounds beautiful.
And I spent quite a bit of time traveling in India. I mean, I from 1977 through 1980. For most of that time, I was traveling in India. I eventually wound up in Japan. I met the woman who became my wife, and then we returned to India together. Subsequent to that, I made other trips to India. And then in 2010, I was on my sabbatical year at the university where I taught for many, many years in Tokyo. And I was invited by a person at Chogule College in Goa, in Margao, to come there and teach a course in creative writing.
Okay.
And I thought that would be a really interesting experience. And
Yes.
then I had been in Goa many, many, many years before, so I knew it was a beautiful place.
Yes.
And I thought, well, now this is a good way to do something that you could call work and still enjoy yourself. So I did that, and I was there for 4 months and returned the next year for 2 months to teach another course during the break at my Japanese university. And then just right before the pandemic, about 4 years ago, I was there again for 2 years.
Okay. So traveling would be serendipitous for you, right?
Well, there's a lot of serendipity along the way, that's for sure. Yeah.
That's true. Okay. So, Robert, when I was going through your book, I realized that the haiku and the senryu that you have penned, they are not like standalone poetic musings. They are mostly based on a theme. So, is that something you did, or is that what traditionally is done in this particular Japanese genre?
I wouldn't say that it's traditional.
Okay.
At the same time, in the English language haiku journals that there are more and more of them all the time. I say English language, but I should also mention that these days haiku are being written and published in a lot of other languages besides Japanese and English, often and in a number of Indian languages.
Hindi for one. I know of a lot of people who are doing it in Hindi as well.
Yes. So, but in these journals, more and more these days, there will be some haiku sequences, sometimes written by a single poet, sometimes two poets writing together, where one poet writes a verse and then another poet somehow responds to that, and they build a sequence.
Yes.
In my case, when I was putting together my first book, I saw that I had 151 poems that I wanted to put in the book.
A huge number.
And I thought that if I just threw them in there randomly, that might appeal to some readers, but I wanted to do more than that. And I began to see that the poems pretty easily fell into a certain number of categories. I mean, there were the poems that were humorous. There were the poems that were clearly focused on some aspect of the natural world. There were poems that were about relationships with other human beings, poems about love. There were these different thematic categories, but there weren't so very many of them. So I looked for a way to put the poems together so that I could develop the book according to this thematic structure. And then I looked within each set of poems for a way to arrange them there. So sometimes the development is chronological, sometimes I use other kinds of connections. But anyway, I did that with my first book. And the idea was already in my mind when I put together the material for this second book, Serendipity. The difference with Serendipity, they're the haiku, or I'm sorry, the haibun there. Well, so I had to think about how to work those into or along with the thematic haiku sequences.
Okay.
I think I came up with something that makes some kind of sense. But
no, it does. Definitely it does. Because an arbitrary putting together of your poetry may not have, the connection is not there at times with the reader. But the way you have put them thematically or chronologically, as you say, although that aspect I didn't observe, but thematically, definitely Winter's Tale and then Mother Nature, those were the themes that you built up on. So that was enjoyable.
Now, all that said, and I'm glad that you saw that and enjoyed it. At the same time, I realized that there are a lot of people who like to read haiku one poem at a time. Read a poem. Well, as you know, I'm sure that in the haiku journals, whether they're in print or online, there's usually a lot of space around the poem. And that's so that the reader can engage with a single poem and perhaps go no further on that particular reading, maybe come back the next day and read another poem. So with that in mind, I did mention in the foreword to my book that if a reader prefers to read my book that way, opening it up at random, picking a poem at random and reading one poem at a time, that's the way most of them were published originally anyway. Most of the poems in the book appeared previously in journals and one by one.
All right. So they give all those spaces around the poem so that the reader may interpret it or, whatever, evaluate it on the basis of his own baggage of emotion or his memories or whatever.
Yeah. Yes.
Store of memories rather than baggage of memories. Yeah.
But if I put that much space around all the poems in this book, the book would be about, it would be quite thick. So
yes.
I thought this was a better way to do it.
This was definitely a better, at least for me, I'm a more traditional kind of person. So I prefer things done in a more traditional way, which would be a whole lot of poems together. So you could read them in a sequence, and pick up on the theme in all of those.
I hope they work that way. That's really ideally what I was hoping for.
Yeah. So, Robert, tell me, out of these 3 genres that you have written in, do you have any favorite? I mean, that's a difficult question to ask, but is any genre closer to your heart, or you get more creative satisfaction from writing in one particular genre rather than, the others?
In terms of haiku and senryu, it's a matter of mood. I would say that somehow senryu, in the narrow definition of that term, is just closer to the kind of person I am, in that I tend to be ironical, overly so. I think I irritate a lot of people that way. I like humor. I like to look at things a little off center, the foibles of human beings, that kind of thing, all of which fits with what senryu traditionally is. At the same time, sometimes I'm more serious minded, and there are times when I would like a poem to just give something of a representation of something I found beautiful in the natural world, or something that I found significant in the natural world. Now, in saying all of that, I imply that there's a clear distinction between haiku and senryu. Yes. And I don't think that there is. To use an example that might support my view, the journal published by the Haiku Society of America, Frog Pond, you may be familiar with that journal. I believe when that journal first appeared, and I don't remember how long ago that was, but decades ago, I believe when it first appeared that there was a section for haiku and a section for senryu. And then they stopped doing that. And then they went back to doing that again. And currently, there's a section that has the heading haiku and senryu. And that's the way most journals do it today. They may put both words in the heading, but they put the poems together, and you can read as closely as you like. And I don't think you're going to find that, that the first half are haiku and the second half are senryu. They're sort of, so whatever distinctions one makes between haiku and senryu, it's a fuzzy boundary.
Yes.
At best. And it's often said that haiku focus on the nature, what is natural, and senryu are focused on matters of human nature.
Yes.
My own view is that human beings are part of nature, and so there's something problematic in that very distinction. So between haiku and senryu, I in the end, I kind of see them as.
In fact, for a person who's not familiar with the 2 genres,
Mm.
It's difficult to distinguish between the two.
Yes, there are times when you can say, "Oh, this is indeed a senryu. This is indeed not a senryu, a haiku."
Yes.
But other times it's difficult.
Really difficult.
Now,
Yeah.
haibun is something altogether different in that there is the prose.
Yes. Yes.
And the prose is going to be, haibun are written sometimes with just one poem, sometimes with two. I've written haibun with 3, 4. I may have even written a haibun that had as many as 5 haiku as part of the text. But even in those pieces, there's more prose than there is poetry. Now, my own approach to the writing of haibun, with the prose parts, I look at that as prose poetry. I try to do with the prose what a poet intentionally writing a piece of prose poetry would do. Play with the language, and you probably have seen that, for example, in that Benares piece, it may appear like I've just broken a grammatical sentence into several shorter fragments. So you can kind of read these fragments together as a sentence, but they're there each with its capital letter at the beginning and period at the end of the fragment. So that's the kind of thing a prose poet might do. I'm writing, I didn't start writing haibun until just a few years ago. I avoided it for a long time because I didn't know very much about it. But when I started trying to write these things, I found that I liked it. And it takes longer to finish a piece. I do enjoy writing them. And I find that with haibun, of course, there's greater scope. Sometimes I like to wax philosophical, and haibun gives you space for doing that. And as I mentioned earlier, with this idea of an exploration of memory, I think the haibun works for that as well. You may have noticed that a lot of pieces move from what is essentially a narrative of a past experience to a perspective on that in the present tense of the piece. And so the haibun allows for that.
Yes, that's right. So, in fact, I really enjoyed reading your haibun.
Thank you. That's encouraging. Do you write, if I may ask you a question, do you write these genres yourself?
No, I don't.
Oh,
but I have interacted with a lot of poets who do, because we often do, special supplements in our magazine of the various Japanese genres. So we did a haiku special, and we did a senryu special, and we did a haibun. This time we're going to be doing a charita special next month. October is going to be a charita supplement. So, and we've been talking to Ailey, who's actually the founder and the creator of that literary genre, charita.
Oh, yeah. I don't know much about it. I know the word. And well, that's good. I look forward to reading it.
Yes. So they tell me, yes. So, Robert, if I were to ask you, now this is a very difficult question. It's like asking a parent to choose his favorite child, But if I was to ask you to pick out 2 pieces from Serendipity on the parameters that it gave you the maximum creative satisfaction, or on another parameter of, say, emotional sustenance, then what would you pick out?
Well, that's like asking the parent of several children which kid you like best. and I don't.
That's exactly why I started with that prelude,
Yeah.
Question, difficult to answer, I know.
I like the haiku sequence with the title "The Soul of Wit" because of the humor in the pieces. I enjoyed very much writing the surrealistic pieces in the book, which comprised one haiku sequence, the one with the title Enter Time, an Imaginary Garage. And there's a haibun in that part of the book with the title Semantics, which also has a surrealistic sort of angle to it. I enjoyed those, but if I were to, there's one piece in the book that means a great deal to me.
Okay.
Because of the subject matter. And that's the piece titled Once Bereft. The phrase once bereft, I borrowed or stole. T.S. Eliot once said that good poets steal from others. Once Bereft appears in a poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins. The title of the poem is Inversnaid, which I think is the name of a river perhaps in Scotland, but I could be wrong about that. It's a poem about the importance of caring for nature. And to some extent, anyway, letting nature be so it is there for the generations that follow us. And in the piece Once Bereft, in which I take a very ironical view of things, it's a piece that brings together a haibun with a haiku sequence. It's the only one of those in the entire book where there's a haiku sequence and a haibun that are together. It was originally published that way. And
sorry to interrupt you, Robert, but would you like to read the piece out for us? Because you've recorded a few pieces for us for our podcast segment, and you did a great job of that. So I'm sure our viewers are going to love to hear you read it out.
Well, okay. I've never been very fond of my own voice. And I know people who read poetry much better than I do, but I have the book right here, so I will. Go ahead. And it begins with a short quotation from the Hopkins poem. Okay. Once bereft. What would the world be once bereft of wet and of wildness? Let them be left.
Beautiful.
From Pangaea to the Tethys Sea, our Mother Earth goes round, and round our central star appears the sun, traveling east to west, from Ethiopia to Hesperides, each day a blessing in this circle of life. Brought into this vital light with plants of every kind and fauna filling land and sea, fruitful we were, and it was good. We crept into caves to mark the walls with ochred images of creatures honored for their flesh, their spirit and being, different from our own, yet of the same. The first peoples made their homes, dressing their bodies, teaching their tongues, cherishing their kinship with the land. We learned to turn the very earth, the oldest of our gods, with plows, back and forth, year after year, reaping, sowing, wearing away the immortal, the seemingly inexhaustible land we would one day forget. And so, as our numbers rose and our cities grew and our knowledge fed our need for power, we tamed and conquered all, or so we thought we would. Quick, ready, resourceful humankind, now more human, less kind. Kinship reduced to a great machine. Our hearts cooled, the earth warmed, we saw no end in sight. Round and round, each flight another victory, and then we mastered space itself. We landed on the moon. What sight? The earth in space, a tiny fragile ball of life hanging in the void. A blue dot. We are a blue dot where we are all one people, living in one world, together in our need to keep this improbable home to all creation in all its diversity, its fragile beauty, our one and only poem.
Right.
That's the haibun part. And then there's a sequence of haiku. Do you want me to read those?
Yes, of course, of course.
Okay. Weather satellites go round and round, empty promises. Fracking, we learn new ways not to change.
True.
An electric car sighs to a stop. The last glacier groans.
Yes. Absolutely.
Snow melt, plum blossoms on a polar bear. Bird of paradise, a rainbow's love song in a chainsaw repertoire.
Yes.
Strip mined, our purple mountain majesties, the emperor's new clothes.
True.
Old pond, spewing toxic waste, a frog croaks. The caboose rattles past the setting sun, dust on stunted corn. Washing up on an island paradise, plastic plates. Rising tide, she lifts her skirt to wipe away a tear. A blue balloon rising into a summer sky, the child waving goodbye. Dry riverbed, the old bridge creaks, bone on bone. So the poems are pretty grim. I apologize for that, but I am trying to get across.
But it sort of reflects the truth out there, no? We've lost that kinship with the land.
Yes, I think it can be regained, I hope.
So I don't know whether it will or it won't, but we seem to be heading in the other direction, actually. No reversal here, I see.
Yes, well, that would lead to another interview. But
yes, I'm sure it would. So, Robert, before we sort of wrap up, one more question. If I was to ask you to describe yourself as a poet in 3 adjectives, what would they be?
Well, now, I'm going to actually read my answer to that to make sure I get it right.
All right.
Let me put it this way.
Okay.
Someone once said that all poets are mad.
Yes.
I don't think I'm mad, but I hope that I'm a little bit off center.
Yes.
Harmlessly, but helpfully weird. John Keats, a poet whom I dearly love, once said that poetry should come to the poet as naturally as leaves to a tree.
Yes.
It was a late development for me. I loved poetry from the time I was a child, but I didn't really start to write seriously until I was a good deal older. But now I really do feel like I must write poems. I can't really stop myself, and I don't want to. And maybe that makes me a leafy tree in his conception. I also take the writing of poems seriously, not only for the ideas and feelings they may convey, but also for the way they can serve as a custodian of the language. Now, this is an idea I've borrowed from others, but poets, I think, have a certain responsibility to the language, to use words correctly, responsibly, to bring dying words back to life. And so I see myself as one who believes in the power of words and can also see how the misuse of words can be a very, very bad thing. I think we see that on a daily basis, and so do what I can. And I'll end this with 2 remarks by one of my favorite poets, Walt Whitman. Whitman once said, "I contain multitudes." And by that, he meant that he saw his poems as speaking to and for and with others.
Right.
And another thing that Whitman said that I think it's a good way for me to close my remarks. To have great poets, there must be great audiences too.
Yes.
As much as I enjoy writing my poems, and when somebody tells me, oh, I like them, I feel good, but they're really there for other people. I mean, I've thought a lot about this. I'm happy that my 2 children have copies of my book. I hope that my grandchildren, when they can read, will one day look at it. But beyond my own family, I just, they're there for other people. And I hope that, and that's why I'm very thankful to you for allowing me to say something about my book.
Not at all. You know, I really like that term you use, custodian of a language. So that's what a poet is. And that really connects with us.
Yeah, I think so. Well, you guys are doing a really good job with that. That's for
We're
sure.
trying to nurture all the genres, having a slightly tough time of it. But yeah, we are soldiering along. So that's okay. I'm enjoying it.
Good.
I hope others are too. Any project you're working on, Robert?
Well, I write almost every day, and I do produce some pieces that I kind of like. It's such a big job putting together a book. In fact, I just got an email this morning from my publisher asking me if I had another book in the pipeline, and I'm going to have to write back and say, not yet. I have some vague ideas, and I hope that, you know, before I pass on, I will be able to do another, or perhaps more than one. Perhaps a book of tanka, which is another genre of Japanese poetry. Over the past few years, I've been writing a lot of those. Some have been published, some I quite like, and putting together a book of those tanka is something I might do.
Yes, that'll be great. I'm going to be looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Robert, for talking to us. And it was such a pleasure interacting with you. It was a real delight listening to you, rendering your own poetry and haibun. And we wish you the very best in all your creative endeavors, and hope you write a whole lot of haiku and tanka and senryu and haibun. And your philosophy sort of weaves through all of that.
Well, thank you. I mean, I can't really thank you enough, and I do wish you all the best, and the work you're doing. I hope that it continues to bear fruit and goes on for a long time and grows. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Goodbye. So I should just click out here. Is that?
Yes, you should.
All right.
That was easy enough, no?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Robert, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.